What up, Wizards? It's Dev with Wednesday's batch of Avatar previews for you, and we are rounding the corner on this thing. Just a few more left that are scheduled, at least, for tomorrow. And I'm going to try to get on tomorrow morning or early afternoon and try to cover what we get tomorrow, but also remember that tomorrow night around 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm getting on twitch.tv/SBMTGDev to rate every single card in this set and assign a number to it and do all kinds of fun stuff. We have a little party every preview season over on Twitch. Come join us, link in the description. But figured I'd go ahead and plug that. Let's get to these cards because we got 18 to 20 of them today, and a couple more might come down the pipeline while I'm reviewing these cards. So it looks like there's a lot to get to on the penultimate day of previews. Let's go ahead and start. Now, I wanted to go ahead and get down to it today because we have so many commons. There's a whole 5 of them today. Commons have been relatively sparse this preview season, which I'm not going to complain about, but I'm also not going to complain when we get a whole 5. So let's start with the Messenger Hawk and Foggy Swamp Hunters here. Now, Messenger Hawk is 3 mana, 2 and a Dimir hybrid for a 1/2 bird scout with flying. When it enters, you get a clue token. And this guy gets +2/+0 as long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn. So in Dimir, this is definitely a theme again in this set. As a matter of fact, the other card we'll look at on this slide also cares if you've drawn a bunch of cards that turn. But in this case, we kind of get another Thraben Inspector variant. We saw a 1-mana one yesterday that when it dies, you get the clue rather than when it comes into play. In this case, you again, when it kind of get it when it comes into play, but it costs 3 times as much as a Thraben or Novice Inspector. But that said, it does have flying, and it's going to get through for some damage a good bit. It shouldn't be hard to get through for 3 damage at least once because it pays you the clue token when it comes into play, but I think like 3 out of 4 turns, this can fly in for 3 damage if you built your deck correctly in draft. Might be a little bit more difficult at your pre-release to get this popping off and flying over for a bunch, but again, I think in draft, you have a little bit more control over your deck. This guy's actually a credible threat that pays you in a card drawn, technically, when he comes into play, so not a bad card there. And Foggy Swamp Hunters is probably at least okay unlimited too. 4 mana, 3 and a black for a 3/4 human ranger ally. As long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, this guy has lifelink and menace. Again, nothing like too special on this, but I'll take a 3-power lifelinker from time to time. That's okay. You can even block up with it and maybe draw a couple of cards with an instant speed effect, and at that point, surprise lifelink block? Yeah, sure, it's not too bad. I'll play this from time to time. But let's kick it up a little bit. I don't even know if it's a full notch in terms of quality, and look at Swamp Snare Trap and Wall Top Sentries here. Swamp Snare Trap is at least a removal spell. It costs 3 mana, 2 and a black, but it costs 1 less to cast if it targets a creature with flying. There's an aura that enchants a creature, and the enchanted creature gets -5, -3, so kind of a Myers grasp of sorts. Nowhere to run is probably a better analogy in current standard, but nowhere to run's not an aura. That might matter depending on what you're doing. But either way, this will often cost 2 mana to blow out a big creature, and I like that about it. Even if it doesn't kill the big creature, it probably at least neutralizes it, and that's cool. But, even if you have to pay the full mana cost for it, it's still going to take a huge chunk out of a creature's power, even if it doesn't send it to the graveyard. So, I don't know, there's some things I like about this, but I don't think it's destined for too much standard play. We just have better options. That said, in Limited, this is a more than fine removal spell. I actually think it's a really, really good one for a common. The Wall Top Sentries is just a little Death Touch guy, which I always support in Limited. This is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 2/3 human soldier ally with both Reach and Death Touch. When it dies, if there's a lesson in your graveyard, you gain 2 life. Overall, I like all the icing on this cake. Reach and Death Touch are great abilities to put together. That's a fantastic combination. It's no first strike Death Touch, but still, your opponent can't attack with even their hugest, flyingest bombs, while you have this out. So these things form a nice little brick wall some of the time. And when you finally do have to block with it because, all hope is lost otherwise, then you at least gain 2 life, stabilize that life total a little bit. So altogether, pretty decent card. Again, one that I'm not super excited about playing, but I will slip a copy or 2 into my pre-release deck from time to time because Reach and Death Touch is always a great combo. Let's take a look at Kyoshi Warriors to finish off the commons here. We might as well look at Invasion Reinforcements to go ahead and breach the uncommons because these are similar cards in some way, although the uncommon is better than the common, if you can imagine. Now, Kyoshi Warriors is 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 3/3 human warrior ally. When it enters, you get a 1/1 white ally creature token. That's all this card does. It's just a 4 mana 3/3 that gets you a guy. I guess it's an ally too, but still, there's really not much to say about this. Thanks for the 2 bodies, I guess. It's good to have cards that give you multiple allies on one card because there's a lot of cards that count allies. I don't know, it's fine. Invasion Reinforcements, on the other hand, looks pretty solid. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 1/1 human warrior ally with flash. When it enters, you get a 1/1 white ally creature token. Well, this is just resolute reinforcements. except that it's a ally. So that's good. You know, I imagine that that's pretty decent. We've already seen that a card like this can see play in, you know, multiple standard environments before. So I could see this one seeing some play too, especially if the allies deck is going to be a thing. This is a proven piece and the kind of piece that it needs. I've already said that this 4-mana guy on screen that gives you an ally might be decent, at least in limited in the allies decks, because you need a bunch of allies on the table. I've already said that about a 3-mana guy that gives you an ally too. Like, oh man, these will really give you a lot of allies in limited. It's good. And this dude is probably like, lady, I guess, is like the cheapest way to get 2 allies on the table in limited. So you play it there, but it wouldn't surprise me if it kind of snuck its way into standard from time to time, depending. But let's look at some more uncommons here, starting with Avalanche and Crashing Wave. Both cards that I'm kind of tempted by in some ways, but end of the day, I think I've outgrown stuff like this. Avalanche reminds me of like Call of the Herd, but is Call of the Herd still good? I don't think so. It's 3 mana, 2 and a green for a sorcery speed lesson. Earthbend X, X being the number of forest you control. And you can flash this back for 5 and a green, 6 total mana. So again, tempting if you remember certain old cards from back in the day that used to be good that are along these lines, right? And Call of the Herd only ever made 3 3s and had flashback. That was a playable Magic card. We are well beyond stuff like that. I do think that if you play this on turn 3 in your mono green deck, sure, you get a 3/3. Later you get a 6/6. Okay, maybe. If you wait a little bit longer to pull the trigger on the flashback, then, you know, you might have like an 8/8. It's entirely possible, but I still don't think that it's actually very good, despite the fact that I would like for it to be fantastic. I just don't know that we're still in the era where a thing like this can do work. We'll see, though, on this one. I fully acknowledge this might be one of those cards that's a little bit better than it reads, and the same thing is true of Crashing Wave, you know, but I think that maybe I'll get in a fight with some people on this one, because this, I think, might look really good at first glance to some people, and I'm just not very high on it, man. This is 2 blue mana for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this, Waterbend X. So you can just pay X mana if you want, or you can tap down artifacts or creatures. Tap up to X target creatures, then distribute 3 counters, stun counters, among tapped creatures your opponents control. This is kind of neat because even if you only hit one dude with it, you stun it for 3 turns. Which isn't removal, but it's pretty close. You know, it's not bad. If this was instant speed, I'd be way more into it, but I don't know. It's not fair to say that about every sorcery you see, right? I still think this effect wants to be instant speed. You play it when your opponent declares attackers or whatever, but nah, you can only do it on your turn, which does mean you can invalidate some blockers. That might be good. You can stun a creature down for 3 turns. You can stun 3 guys down for 1 turn. You can stun this guy down for 2 turns, the other guy for 1 turn. I do like the choice on this card, and I do like the kind of modality of it. You know, I'm going to tap down all 5 of your guys because I have enough artifacts and lands to tap or whatever. And then we'll discuss what things get the stun counters and what am I afraid of, what am I not. So again, I kind of like the choice on it, but at the end of the day, I think there's better things to put in your Magic deck if you're playing competitive standard. For the most part, even in a tempo build that might ostensibly want something like this, I do just feel like there's better options. You only have like 36 slots in your deck after lands, and I just ultimately don't think this makes the cut. Well, let's look next at Hermetic Herbalist and Knowledge Seeker. I like both of these a little bit. Now, Herbalist is 2 mana, a green and a blue for a 2/3 human druid ally. Tap for a mana of any color. That's fine right there. But you can also tap her down to add 2 mana in any combination of colors. You can only use that mana to cast lesson spells. So that's, again, fine in your lesson deck. I don't know if lessons are going to be a thing, man. In standard, I really don't think so. At least not until we get Strixhaven. Maybe we get some more stuff to do with legends, with lessons. But as it goes in limited, I think this is a more than fine card that you're going to draft most copies of, so long as you're in Simic or some 3-color combination that includes blue and green. I think this is just like, not a must draft, but you'll snap it up when you do see it. The mana fixing is great. Ramping is always good. It's a 2 mana 2/3 apart from just being a dork, and that's not bad. This old lady is a 2/3. This dork that works on plants is a 2/3. That's kind of amazing. But either way, if you can, you know, cast lessons way ahead of schedule with this, then obviously it becomes great, but it's just kind of okay even if you're not doing lesson stuff. That's a great card for limited, and I don't think it really makes the jump to standard, but still one of the more noteworthy uncommons we've seen. At least again for limited. This thing looks like kind of a beast there, but Knowledge Seeker is kind of impressive too. This is 2 mana, 1 on a blue for a 2/1 Fox Spirit with Vigilance. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. When this creature dies, you get a clue token. So that's a lot of potential value. You know, you get a 2 mana 2/1 with a keyword ability that gets larger turn over turn and pays you something when it dies. That's a ton of value on one guy. Kind of hard to say this makes the jump to standard too. I think it's just a little bit too weak. Actually, I think it's like 2 notches too weak for being, a standard 2-drop. It's actually playable. But again, I think we're kind of getting somewhere with this. I think it's not too difficult to draw extra cards in a turn. It can obviously grow by +2/+2 per turn cycle, but I think it's going to be kind of tough to pull that off for the most part. If you just put a counter on this every turn, it's going to be a 4/3 before too long. I think most games will go long enough to make this a 3/2 or a 4/3 fairly easily. And again, it's got vigilance. So if you've got a 4-power guy and you can swing in but still block, that's not too bad. So for your 2-mana investment, you get a creature that will get large before too long, and even if it does end up dying or it eats a removal spell or whatever, you still get some value out of it. You might be able to use the clue for more than just drawing a card. So I don't know. There's a lot I like about this. Again, I think that the name of the game here is just potential value, and there's a lot of that, but even if you don't get all the value off of it that you want, you still get paid something when your opponent kills it. So altogether, I think it's pretty solid. Also, I guess the wonky limited tech on this is that it's one of the few creatures in the set that is naturally a spirit. We've got a few, like Benevolent River Spirit here on the next slide, and Airbender's Reversal, I guess, is also here. But I'm not going to say there aren't any spirits in the set. We're looking at one right now. But it is kind of noteworthy when a creature is a spirit, because we have all these cards that make 1/1 tokens that are spirits, and they can't be blocked unless it's by another spirit. So again, if you have spirits in limited, then they can block those little tokens, and that kind of matters. But when it comes to Benevolent River Spirit here, this is 2 blue mana for a 4/5 spirit. As an additional cost to cast it, Waterbend 5. This has flying and ward 2, and when it enters, scry 2. So the problem with this, because I really want to like this too, is that Abhorrent Oculus exists. In any other circumstance, I would be like, oh, wow, we have Helping Hand in Standard. We have Recommission in Standard. So we can just reanimate this and have a 4/5 flyer on turn 2 or something. But that's not that impressive when you could have a 5/5 flyer that makes extra 2/2s for you every turn, including on your opponents. So again, this is not as impressive as I would like it to be. But if Abhorrent Oculus never existed, I'd be like, man, we got to make a deck out of this. It's a cool looking card too. For what it's worth, I think that Ward 2 is something that Abhorrent Oculus doesn't have. That might be worth thinking about. And an Enter the Battlefield trigger is something that Abhorrent Oculus doesn't really have either. So I don't know. This has a few things going for it, and a 4/5 is pretty stocky for the early game. If anything, this could be copies effectively 5 and 6 of Oculus in those Helping Hand decks. But have you noticed those Helping Hand decks aren't amazing lately? It's when everyone plays 4 copies of Ghost Vacuum in the sideboard. They're not great in best of 3, but still, Benevolent River Spirit is a cool card. We've seen takes on stuff like this before. Things that say, oh, you can't cast it until such and such turn. This reminds me of stuff like that, but maybe if you get enough artifacts or small creatures down, you can cast this really early. All things considered, I think it's kind of a nice little card. I like the design on it. I like the art on it, and I like everything it does. So I'm obligated to say that I like it. But again, I don't know if this is a standard all-star, but back in my day, it would have been. Let me say that much. And yes, I have just unironically said back in my day with no jokes detected. I am an old man. Airbender's Reversal is, I guess, the final uncommon of the day so far. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for an instant speed lesson. Choose one of these things. Either destroy target attacking creature, okay, or airbend a creature that you control. Okay, so a removal spell and a protection spell, all in a 2 mana instant speed package, and they just slapped lesson onto it. This is fantastic. To me, this is the best uncommon of the day by a good bit, and we've seen a 2 mana 4/5 flying ward 2 today. As well as Knowledge Seeker. I really think Knowledge Seeker, the Fox Spirit for 2 mana that grows and gives you a clue when it dies, I think that thing might be close to the level, but Airbender's Reversal is a card that I have to say this again, and I feel weird saying this over and over. I'm not sure that it's actually that standard playable, but this is one of those where in just the right deck, Bogle's kind of list with, enchantments like Ethereal Armor and whatnot, and Shard Mage's Rescue, something that wants to protect a really important investment that it's made, but also needs to somehow find a way to get removal spells into its deck, excuse me. So this allows them to play both of those cards in one card, consolidate their deck list, and I think that'll matter a good bit. If anything plays something like this, it will be, white X enchantments, white X Bogles in standard. And we do have decks like that, but they haven't exactly been, world-ending decks in standard lately at the very least. But I don't know, if this finds a home anywhere, I imagine it'll be a deck like that. You got to protect your dudes, but you also have to have spells in your deck that, alter your opponent's board state. This is pretty good at doing both of them, and it's pretty efficient at doing both of them too, so I kind of like it. But let's move on to the rares here, ladies and gentlemen. Look at what is probably realistically a worse card than the one we just looked at. This is Earthen Ally over here. A single green mana for a 0/2 human soldier ally that gets +1/+0 for each color among allies you control. Remember, that's going to make it a 1/2 really, because it is green. But in any case, you can also pay 2 and Wooburg a total of 7 mana to Earthbend 5 whenever you want to, as many times as you want to. There's no once a turn, there's no sorcery speed, only during your turn. None of that. You do this whenever you want to. But it's 7 freaking mana. But that said, I've gone on record a bunch of times before saying I like 1-drops that have relevance later on in the game, and this is nothing if not that, man. I don't know if we're doing 5-color allies, but we got Cavern of Souls, we got the Dragon Tea, whatever it's called. Sorry, fans of the show, but we got the land that lets you cast allies of any color, basically. We have Starting Town and Standard too, so we might have plenty of ways to get a 5-color allies deck together. Just not sure if it's worth it. Really not, but this is your 1-drop, it might be better than I think. Its toughness is never going to be larger than 2, so even if you have all 5 colors out effectively, it's still just going to be a 5/2, which is good for 1 mana. Like, don't get me wrong, but it'll probably take you a few turns to build it up to a 5/2, and even if you can, it's still going to trade with 1 and 2 drops in this environment. So I'm not the biggest fan of that aspect of the card, but I do like a 1 mana 5-power guy, which just can be, and I don't even think it's that difficult, but it'll probably be turn 3 or 4 before you can do it. And if you draw another mono green ally, it's like, well, that's wasted. You know, it doesn't increase its power whatsoever. Altogether, I kind of, again, like the design on this. I understand the safety measures that were put in place on something like this, but at the same time, I think it's a little bit too safe. But next, let's take a look at Great Divide Guide. Speaking of allies here, but this doesn't just care about allies. This is 1 and a green for a 2/3 human scout ally. Each land and ally you control has tap. Add a mana of any color. So note that means this guy can tap for mana of any color. And again, 2 mana 2/3, just like Hermetic Herbalist or whatever. So a couple of 2 mana 2/3s, not an embarrassing stat line that can also tap for mana. I like it. Also fix all the mana on your lands. And if you even have 1 or 2 other allies out, he's kind of like a Cryptolith Rite or an Enduring Vitality. Is that the one that's green? Probably. But either way, letting all your creatures tap down for mana is pretty good, especially just on a 2 mana dude. So I like that about him, but it's pretty specific to your ally deck if you really want to juice all the mana in the world out of it. And I think the ally decks are going to mostly try to play, you know, fast. And this dude isn't particularly fast, but hey, you know, that last guy we just saw, it looks like we're playing a green base and with 5 colors, and this definitely helps you play that kind of deck. So I can't hate it. You know, I certainly kind of the opposite of that. If I'm playing allies, I want to try the dude out. And again, just having like, I don't know, Chromatic Lantern or an effect like it on a 2 mana dude is pretty decent in the first place. So, you know, a lot of things to love about this guy. But when it comes to ally stuff today, I think the best card we got was South Pole Voyager. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/2 human scout ally. Whenever this creature or another ally you control enters, you gain 1 life. If this is the second time this ability is resolved this turn, draw a record. So, okay, this makes all of those dudes that put an extra ally into play in the form of a token way better and make way more sense that we've already seen like 4 of those guys in this set. You know, the Resolute Reinforcements guy or whatever, they all work super duper well with this dude because they only take 1 card to draw a card and gain a life. You actually gain 2 life in that case. So pretty cool stuff, man. You get kind of an Impassioned Orator style effect. Also on top of a, whenever you play an ally, draw a card effect. Just nuts. You'll only ever draw 1 card a turn, and, you know, past turn 3 or 4, it's going to become progressively harder to actually trigger the card draw effect on it, especially if you like run out of cards in your hand. I really want you to double spell on the next turn. But again, there's ways around that. You play one thing that gives you 2 allies and suddenly it's crazy cards. So I don't know. If there's an allies deck, I think this definitely goes in. It's not aggressive either, but it's a card draw engine. And nowadays, even our aggro decks tend to need card draw engines. So I could definitely see it getting a spot. Next rare of the day is one that I'm particularly excited about, but I'm also trying to be realistic about. This is Obsessive Pursuit. 2 mana. It's 1 and a black for an enchantment. When this enchantment enters, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and you get a clue token. Whenever you attack, put X +1/+1 counters on target attacking creature, where X is the number of permanents you've sacrificed this turn. If X is 3 or greater, the creature gains lifelink until end of turn. Okay, so this is not Bitter Blossom or anything, but it does give you a token every single turn, and that token kind of draws a card a little bit. So not Bitter Blossom, not Phyrexian Arena, but you see where I'm going. Extra clue every turn is at least something, and you also get the clue when it enters, which I think is nice. It's nice that it does that. An artifact and an enchantment on the table for 2 mana, and the artifact draws you a card. Sure, but this is going to be pretty decent certain commander builds for Aristocrats, sacrifice decks and whatnot. I do think the card is not great in standard, especially considering the last thing you want to do the way Aristocrats is currently built is skip your turn 2 not playing a creature and playing enchantment instead. That is not what you want, son. I can promise you that. But even if you wait until turn 4 to play this or whatever, I still don't think it's going to be good most of the time in standard, honestly. But in Commander, things get a little bit different when you've got a bunch of tokens to sacrifice, or you've just got a bunch of creatures you can sacrifice that'll come back. I sacrificed my Gutter Bones like 5 times in the same turn and loop it, and there's like 8 other creatures you can do that with. Now in Standard, there are creatures you can do that with, but I'm still not convinced this is going to be great, even with, the warp guy. You know what I mean? It could be, but again, you'll have to convince me. I'll have to see it to believe it. In Commander, though, I think there's plenty of strings where you can put like 3 to 5 counters on a creature every turn and give that creature lifelink when it attacks. So, at this point, even your Blood Artists are getting 3 for 8 damage. So, again, kind of excited about it there, but we'll have to wait and see if it meets expectations in Commander, because this could flop there too. There's going to be turns where you don't sacrifice anything because Aristocrats is like constantly building to the big sack turn, and you're not often sacrificing stuff until you get to that turn. So, right, maybe a sacrifice here, a sacrifice there, and your creature's getting slightly bigger every turn, but it's still just not enough to really, justify its inclusion in the deck. I will acknowledge here that it does, give extra counters when you sacrifice clues and stuff like that, treasure tokens as well, which is maybe what it's most relevant with. But again, I want to have to be convinced on this, but as far as Commander goes, I'll play it myself to make that determination. I'm excited about the card. Next is a card that I think might be a trap, but still looks pretty powerful. This is Waterbender Ascension. 3 mana? It's obviously just 2. Why can't I read lately? Yesterday or the day before, I called a card that costs 4 and a white. I said it costs 4 and a red for no reason. I've just been getting my colors wrong lately. Now apparently I'm getting my mana costs wrong. Waterbender Ascension costs 2 mana, 1 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a quest counter on this enchantment. Then, if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, draw a card. And if you waterbend 4, a creature cannot be blocked this turn. So again, you can just pay mana for that. You can tap down a couple of errant artifacts. This is where extra clue tokens in the format come in a good bit. Treasure tokens you can effectively now tap down to waterbend stuff without having to sacrifice them. I kind of like that. So maybe waterbending is a little bit easier than I think it is. And so unblockability is not only an excellent way to to push damage through and win a game, but it's an excellent way to get quest counters on this. I think that this might be a little tougher to get to, the requisite 4 quest counters than some of the other enchantments. Not every day do you get in for combat damage. It's always much harder, even though it's kind of one of the primary actions in a game of Magic. It is easier said than done to get in for combat damage, but at least it's not whenever 1 or more creatures deal combat. It's whenever a creature you control. So it's easy to envision a world where you play this on turn 2. Again, skipping your turn 2 in a deck where you want to be attacking, I don't know about, but either way, you play this on turn 2 or maybe again turn 4. You get in with a guy or 2. And suddenly it's already getting counters. So again, maybe it's not too hard to get to 4. And once it does get to 4, it's just Enduring Curiosity or Reconnaissance Mission or Coastal Piracy or any of the million cards in blue that are like this. It just costs half as much as those cards, but it makes you invest into it a little bit, So I think most of the time in Standard, I would probably rather just cast Enduring Curiosity with Flash, right, than play a card like this. But maybe, again, the Waterbend 4, a creature can't be blocked this turn is a lot more relevant than I think it is. Unblockability is one of my favorite things to do in a game of Magic. I think, again, when you get to Commander, maybe it gets a little bit better because you've got 3 opponents that you can, more likely get in for combat damage on at least one of them, right? Especially earlier enough in the game. And maybe you have a bunch of mana rocks and other random artifacts in your deck. That format's a little bit more conducive to the Waterbend mode on this. And I think the Waterbend mode on this is really, really good in Commander, by the way. Not just because you can probably get to it easier. You got more mana and artifacts and stuff sitting around, but also because unblockability can be crazy in that format, right? You just get through for all the damage in the world. I don't know, your jumbo cactar or something. It could happen. But in any case, man, yeah, I think this is a solid Magic card, but I'm a little wary of it in a format like Standard. But here's the last in the you might as well play them anyway land cycle from the set. This is Agna Kala. There's no way I got that right. This is a land that enters tapped unless you control a basic land, so it's pretty easy. This one taps for a blue, and you can pay 2 blue and tap it to draw a card, and then discard a card. So it effectively costs 4 mana to do that. You know, I can't tell you how many times I played the red land, was it Quarry Mountain Monastery or something like that? The red land that costs like 4 mana to just impulse draw a card until the end of the next turn. I love that card. It's drawn in quotations, a bunch of cards for me. So I'm sure I'll play this one. You know, a loot isn't a drawn card, but a loot can do even more than a drawn card under the right circumstances. Yeah, I'm envisioning a situation where Solar Flare might be back on the rise, and if you've never heard of that, I wouldn't be surprised. Solar Flare is a deck from over 15 years ago that was basically a hybrid Reanimator / control deck. You know, some control elements, but also a Reanimator deck that just, you know, puts a huge dude on the table late in the game. And I think that stuff like this is, you know, again, really conducive. I'll use that word twice. It's kind of pretentious, but still, I think this is like really conducive to a deck like that. And we've seen a few pieces like that recently. But again, drawing and discarding is better now than it's ever been because so much value can be gotten out of your graveyard that drawing a card and then discarding a card is sometimes better than just straight up drawing a card. I'm not going to say it always is, but again, depending on your deck, it can be. And in all these decks that play, you know, Tercellite Shatter, FOMO, especially Marauding Mako, you know, Steam Core Scholar, like this core of creatures that want to discard, and some of which will get a benefit from discarding. You know, you see Monument to Endurance in these decks as well. Agna Kala works extremely well in those decks, you know, so I don't know. There's a lot that I like about this. Works with Flashback, works with Reanimator, works with Mayhem, I guess. Just a lot of stuff to do potentially in Standard, and it's honestly not that much to ask on a land to get this ability. As far as the mana cost goes, at least. You know, it looks kind of steep. It kind of costs 4 mana in order to make it work, but I think it's going to be worth it most of the time to run this in your control deck. But that is all ski Kowalski for today, y'all, and again, we are closing in on it. Not too much left to see from this set, and so far, the set has looked really good. I'm a lot happier with this one than I was Spider-Man. Even though I think I know more about Spider-Man than Avatar, it just looks like a lot more love was put into this set from what I can tell. And it looks more organized. It looks like they didn't change the way the set was supposed to be designed like 3 times during the design process. So again, it all kind of shines through. And so far, the set is not only looking kind of powerful, but also, again, like they actually put some TLC into it, which I can appreciate. Just let me know how you felt about all the stuff from today. That blue land is all right, though. You can also like the video on your way out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. And of course, we got it at Patreon. Just $1 a month is all it takes to sign up and vote on what decks we do during Avatar Standard, which is really, really close now. But anyway, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and pack it in for the day. Kind of get some rest for tomorrow because it's a big one. I will see y'all then. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.